The radio crackled with static as I cruised through the deserted streets of the industrial district. Midnight shifts were always eerie, but tonight felt off. The air was thick with mist, curling through the alleyways like something alive, and the hum of my patrol car's engine was the only sound. Dispatch buzzed in. Unit 8, we have a report of possible trespassing at the old Claymore warehouse. No backup available. You're the closest. Proceed with caution. I groaned inwardly. Claymore had been shut down for years, the kind of place that drew ghost hunters, urban explorers, and occasionally drifters. The thought of a dark, abandoned building on a foggy night wasn't thrilling, but duty called. I turned the car down the cracked, overgrown driveway and killed the engine. The building loomed ahead, a black monolith against the foggy sky. The windows were shattered, their jagged edges like teeth. The main door creaked open slightly, swaying in the wind, or so I thought. My flashlight flickered as I stepped out of the car. I tapped it against my palm, muttering, "Not now, damn it." Inside, the air was damp and reeked of mildew. My boots crunched on broken glass as I swept the flashlight across the cavernous space. Empty crates were stacked like forgotten monoliths, casting long shadows. And then I heard it. A faint sound, almost imperceptible. A wet, dragging noise, like someone pulling a sack of stones. I stopped, my heart pounding. "Police," I called out. My voice echoed, sharp and hollow. "If anyone's here, show yourself." The dragging stopped. For a long moment there was silence. Then, from somewhere deeper in the warehouse, a single light flickered on. Not a steady beam, but the weak, sputtering kind you'd find in horror movies. It illuminated a narrow corridor leading further into the building. "Hell no," I muttered under my breath. But something, a mix of curiosity, duty, and the unsettling feeling that I was being watched, pushed me forward. The corridor was lined with doors, each slightly ajar, each emanating a faint metallic smell. As I moved, the dragging sound resumed, louder now, coming from the end of the hall. My pulse quickened. "All right?" I called out, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Last warning." I reached the end of the corridor, where a door stood fully closed, a rarity in this decrepit building. A faded maintenance sign hung askew on it. The dragging noise was unmistakable now, just beyond that door. Taking a deep breath, I placed my hand on the handle and pushed. The room beyond was lit by a single swinging bulb, revealing a horrific tableau. A dozen mannequins, life-sized, eerily realistic, were arranged in a semicircle. Some were missing limbs. Others had their faces disfigured, melted, or scarred, as if someone had taken a blowtorch to them. In the center of the room stood a figure, its back turned to me. At first glance, it looked like another mannequin. But then it moved, slowly, deliberately. It turned, and my stomach dropped. It was a man, or at least it had been. His face was pale and stretched unnaturally, like it didn't quite fit his skull. His eyes were pitch black, glossy, and unblinking. In his hands, he held what looked like a mannequin's arm, dragging it across the floor. "Police!" I shouted, raising my gun. "Get on the ground, now!" He tilted his head, as if considering my command. Then, without warning, he dropped the mannequin arm and lunged toward me with an inhuman speed. I fired twice, the gunshots deafening in the confined space. He didn't stop. I barely had time to react as he slammed into me, sending me sprawling. My flashlight skittered across the floor, casting wild shadows. Scrambling to my feet, I drew my baton, but he was gone, vanished into the shadows as if he'd never been there. My radio crackled. "Unit 8, status check?" My voice trembled as I replied, "Claymore Warehouse, suspect attacked, requesting immediate backup." The dragging sound began again, but this time it was all around me, echoing from every direction. The mannequins seemed closer now, their hollow eyes fixed on me. And then the lights went out. I stood frozen in the suffocating darkness, the sound of my breathing too loud in the silence. The dragging noise intensified, circling me, but my flashlight was gone, swallowed by the void. My hand fumbled for my radio. "Back up, now!" I barked, the tremor in my voice betraying me. The radio hissed and popped, then went dead. A faint light began to flicker again, not from my flashlight, but from somewhere deeper in the room. It was dim and sickly, illuminating patches of the space like the glow of a dying bulb. The mannequins stood eerily still, but something was different. Their heads, every one of them, were now turned to face me. Their glassy eyes seemed alive, tracking my every move. The dragging stopped. Silence, thick and oppressive, fell over the room. Then from the darkness came a voice, low, guttural, and wrong. "You shouldn't have come." I spun, gripping my baton tightly, but saw nothing. "Show yourself," I yelled, my voice cracking. The voice chuckled, the sound bouncing off the walls. "You think you can leave?" A sudden sharp noise made me whip around. One of the mannequins had moved, or had it? Its arm was outstretched, pointing toward the far wall, where the faint light glowed. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but my legs betrayed me, inching toward the light. The glow revealed another door, slightly ajar. I hesitated, then pushed it open with the baton. The air inside was colder, biting against my face. The room was smaller, its walls covered in symbols I didn't recognize, spirals, eyes, and shapes that seemed to shift when I looked at them too long. In the center of the room was a large mirror, its surface clouded and rippling like water. My reflection was there, but wrong. My face distorted, my eyes sunken and blackened, like the figure I'd encountered. My reflection smiled, even as I stood paralyzed in horror. Behind me, in the mirror's reflection, the mannequins began to move. Slowly, jerking unnaturally, they advanced toward me, their mouths stretched into ghastly grins, teeth glinting where there shouldn't have been any. I spun around. They were closer now, forming a tight circle, their grins widening as their heads twitched unnaturally. I raised the baton uselessly as one lunged forward, and then the mirror shattered. The explosion of glass filled the air, shards raining down like a storm. A deafening roar followed, a rush of wind that sent the mannequins toppling. The sickly light flared and extinguished, plunging the room into absolute darkness. I don't remember running, but I found myself outside, gasping for breath, my patrol car in sight. The warehouse stood silent and foreboding behind me, its windows now dark. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, locking myself inside the car and calling dispatch. When backup arrived, I told them everything, or at least tried. They swept the building, finding only dust and decay. No mannequins, no symbols, no shattered mirror, just an empty, abandoned warehouse. They looked at me like I was crazy, and maybe I was. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In my rearview mirror, for the briefest moment, I saw them. Rows of mannequins lined up along the edge of the woods, their hollow eyes glinting in the moonlight. And behind them, the pale figure smiled. It was nearly midnight, and my hands were shaking as I tried to unlock the door to my small, dimly lit apartment. My job as a dispatcher for the local police department often kept me on edge, but tonight was worse. Earlier, an officer had called in a strange report, a 911 hang-up from a house that didn't officially exist. The house was listed as condemned over 30 years ago, long before I was born. Yet the caller had whispered for help so frantically that I could still hear their voice in my mind. Then the line cut out, and every attempt to trace the signal was met with static. I shrugged it off as exhaustion and opened the door to my apartment. The air inside was stale, and shadows played across the walls as I flicked on the light. Tossing my keys onto the counter, I froze. The TV was on. I hadn't left it on. I didn't even use it that often. Static crackled on the screen, cutting through the silence. I approached cautiously, heart pounding in my chest. As I reached for the remote, the screen blinked, and the static shifted into an image. A darkened room, flickering fluorescent light. And then I saw it. A figure standing in the corner, barely illuminated. Its back was hunched, its limbs too long for its body. The face, shrouded in shadows, seemed to tilt toward the camera. It didn't move, but felt alive, as though it was waiting. The screen blinked again. This time, there was a loud thud from my bedroom. I didn't want to move. Every instinct screamed at me to leave the apartment, but my legs carried me forward, step by reluctant step, down the hall. I pushed the door open. The room was empty, but the window, which I always locked before leaving, was wide open. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it the faintest sound of laughter. Or was it crying, echoing from the street below? I leaned out, peering into the darkness. Nothing. Just the usual quiet city street. That's when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The caller ID was blank. Hands trembling, I answered. Hello? Static. And then a voice. Don't turn around. The line went dead. I spun instinctively, even though every nerve in my body begged me not to. The hallway behind me stretched longer than it should have, the end disappearing into an unnatural darkness. The air grew colder, and for a moment, I swore I saw something move at the edge of the shadows. I didn't wait to find out. Grabbing my keys, I bolted for the door. As I passed the TV, the image changed. It now showed the front of my apartment building. The camera zoomed in on a figure standing beneath the lone street lamp. It was the same hunched figure from before, and it was looking up. I froze mid-step, staring at the screen. The figure wasn't moving, but its head tilted slightly upward, as though meeting my gaze through the camera lens. The image on the TV flickered, distorting momentarily before refocusing. Now the figure had taken a step closer to the building, closer to me. I didn't think. I ran out of the apartment, down the stairwell, and into the cold night air. The street outside was empty, eerily silent for a city that usually hummed with distant sirens and late-night activity. The lone street lamp buzzed faintly, its light flickering. The figure was gone, or so I thought. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the shadows across the street, a flash of pale, impossibly long limbs. My instincts screamed at me to get in my car, but my car keys were still sitting on the counter inside my apartment. Think, I muttered to myself, backing away from the shadows. My breaths came out in short, visible puffs, the temperature around me unnaturally cold. Then the static returned, not from the TV, but from my phone. I pulled it out, and the screen was glowing dimly. No caller ID, just a single message. Look up. I hesitated. My neck felt stiff, as though something heavy was pressing down on me. Slowly, against every survival instinct I had, I raised my eyes. There it was. Perched on the edge of the building across the street, its silhouette stretched and distorted against the faint glow of the city lights. Its eyes, large empty voids, seemed to pull every ounce of heat and life from the air. It didn't move, yet the very sight of it made my knees weak. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the curb. The creature's head twitched, then its limbs elongated unnaturally, gripping the edges of the building. In a sickening, fluid motion, it began crawling down the wall, towards me. "Nope, nope, nope," I whispered, spinning on my heel and bolting down the street. My legs burned as I pushed myself to run faster, my breath hitching with each frantic step. I didn't dare look back. The sound of scraping concrete filled my ears, echoing off the buildings around me. I spotted the neon glow of a late-night diner ahead. Light, people, safety. I crashed through the door, gasping for air, startling the few patrons seated at the counter. The cook behind the grill raised an eyebrow. "You okay, buddy?" I couldn't speak. Instead, I staggered to the nearest booth, my eyes darting to the glass windows. Outside, the street was still empty. No sign of the creature. I started to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. The stress of the night, the weird 911 call, my overactive imagination. That's all it was. I pulled out my phone to call the police, just in case. That's when I saw it. The reflection in the diner window. It was sitting in the booth behind me, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, the hollow voids of its eyes locked onto mine. Its elongated fingers rested on the table, tapping slowly, rhythmically, as if counting down. 1, tap, 2, tap, 3. The lights in the diner flickered. Then everything went black. I don't remember much after that. Just the sound of my own screams echoing in the darkness. When I woke up, it was morning. I was lying in the middle of the street, the neon sign of the diner buzzing faintly above me. The police said they found no one inside. No cook, no patrons, nothing. Just the faint smell of static and burnt wires. And on my phone, a single new video. I haven't dared to open it. It was 2:37 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The ringtone was barely audible over the sound of rain hammering the windows. Calls at this hour usually meant trouble. Reluctantly, I picked up, expecting a frantic family member or a drunk friend needing a ride. Instead, the voice on the other end was calm, but urgent. "This is Officer Williams with the city's precinct. Am I speaking with your name?" A jolt of anxiety shot through me. I had never been in trouble with the law, but my heart raced like I'd just committed a crime. "Yes, this is me. Is something wrong?" I asked, gripping the phone tighter. "We need you to come down to the station," he said. "It's about your property." My property? That made no sense. I hadn't lost anything, and as far as I knew, my apartment was secure. Before I could probe further, the line clicked dead. I debated for a moment but decided to go. Rain soaked through my hoodie as I sprinted to my car, the streets eerily empty under the sodium yellow glow of the streetlights. When I arrived at the station, I found Officer Williams waiting for me. He was a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes and a uniform that looked like it had seen too many late-night shifts. Without a word, he gestured for me to follow him. The hallways were stark and cold, the fluorescent lights casting everything in a sterile glow. He led me into a small interrogation room where a grainy black and white photo was placed on the table. The photo was of my apartment, specifically my living room window. "What am I looking at?" I asked, confused and slightly irritated. "This was taken by our surveillance unit 3 nights ago," he replied. "We had a tip about a person of interest in your neighborhood. Do you see anything unusual?" I leaned in closer. At first, it seemed like an ordinary shot of my apartment, but then I saw it. A faint reflection in the window, a face staring inside. My stomach churned. "That's impossible," I stammered. "I've lived there for years. I've never seen anyone like that." Williams slid another photo across the table. This one was taken from a different angle. The figure was clearer now, pale, gaunt, and distorted. like someone pressed their face against the glass for hours. "We've been monitoring your building," Williams said. "There's been a string of strange incidents. People in the neighborhood have reported hearing footsteps on their roofs, tapping on their windows." "But that doesn't explain why you called me," I interrupted, panic creeping into my voice. Williams hesitated, his expression grave. "The person in the photo isn't a suspect. They're the victim." I froze. "What?" "They were found dead in the alley behind your apartment last night. Cause of death is unknown, but..." He trailed off, then slid a file toward me. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside were autopsy photos. The victim's face was the same one from the photo, but their features were warped, unnaturally elongated, as if something had stretched their skull. Deep claw marks ran down their neck and chest. I felt like I was going to be sick. "There's more," Williams said. "We reviewed the footage. That figure? They were at your window for 7 hours straight." I pushed back from the table, shaking my head. "This has to be some kind of joke." "I wish it were," he said, his voice low. "After the figure left your window, they didn't walk away. They crawled, backwards, all the way to the alley." The room seemed to close in around me. My thoughts raced. Had I heard anything? Seen anything? I couldn't remember. All I could picture was that distorted face staring through my window. Williams leaned closer. "We need you to check your apartment. Look for anything unusual, anything out of place." I wanted to refuse, to stay in the relative safety of the police station, but something told me this wasn't going to go away. Begrudgingly, I agreed. When I got back home, the place felt different. The air was heavy, the shadows deeper. I checked every window, every door, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then I noticed the floor. Into the corner of the living room, right beneath the window from the photo, was a small puddle of water. It hadn't rained that night, and there was no leak in the ceiling. The water glistened faintly, as if something had been standing there, dripping. I took a step closer, and that's when I saw it. Scratches on the windowsill. They weren't deep, but they formed a pattern. 5 thin lines, like claw marks, running parallel to each other. My heart pounded as I backed away. That's when I heard it. A soft tapping, coming from the bedroom. I froze. The tapping was deliberate, slow and rhythmic, like someone rapping their nails against the glass. My bedroom was at the back of the apartment, with no fire escape and no easy access. Whoever or asterisk whatever asterisk was making that sound shouldn't be there. Gripping my phone, I debated calling the police, but something inside me whispered that they wouldn't get here in time. Every instinct screamed for me to run, to leave the apartment and never come back. But my legs felt like lead. Slowly, I moved toward the hallway, the tapping growing louder with each step. When I reached the bedroom door, I stopped. The sound had changed. It was no longer a steady tap. It was faster now, erratic, like someone was scratching the glass with desperate intensity. My hand hovered over the doorknob. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. The scratching stopped. The silence was worse. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I pushed the door open. The room was pitch black except for the faint glow of the street lamp filtering through the curtains. The window was shut, but frost crawled along the glass in jagged patterns, even though it wasn't cold outside. Then I saw it. A shadow in the corner. It didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. "Leave," I whispered, clutching my phone like a lifeline. "Whoever you are, just go." The shadow shifted. Slowly, it stepped into the faint light. My stomach dropped. It was the figure from the photo. Pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to sink into its skull. Its limbs were too long, its fingers ending in sharp, blackened tips. But the worst part was its mouth, a jagged, unnatural grin that stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. It tilted its head, watching me with an almost curious expression. Then it spoke. "You left the window unlocked," it rasped, its voice a guttural whisper that sounded like it hadn't been used in years. I wanted to say hello. I stumbled backward, my phone slipping from my hand. The thing lunged forward, its movements jerky and insect-like. I scrambled out of the room, slamming the door shut and locking it. My breaths came in short, panicked gasps as I grabbed a chair and wedged it under the doorknob. The scratching started again, louder this time, more frantic. I bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock, when the sound stopped. The sudden silence sent a chill down my spine. I turned, half expecting the thing to be standing right behind me, but the hallway was empty. And then I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps, coming from the ceiling. I looked up just in time to see the drywall crack and buckle. The creature's face emerged from the shadows, peering down at me through a hole it had clawed open. Its grin widened. "No one escapes," it hissed. Adrenaline kicked in, and I flung the door open, sprinting into the rain-soaked night. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys and locking myself inside. My hands trembled as I started the engine, the headlights illuminating the empty street. Empty, except for a figure standing in the middle of the road. It was the creature. It didn't run or lunge. It just stood there, staring, its head tilted as if it were memorizing me. I hit the gas, swerving around it and speeding into the night. I didn't stop driving until I reached the police station. Officer Williams was waiting for me, his face pale and grim. Before I could explain, he held up a hand. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not the first." He handed me a file. Inside were more photos, more windows, more reflections, more faces twisted in terror. One photo was circled in red, dated just 2 nights ago. It showed a man's apartment window, and staring out from inside the glass was the same pale, grinning figure. The address was mine. "Whatever it is," Williams said, "it marks you, and once it does, it doesn't stop." I wanted to argue, to scream that it wasn't fair, but deep down I already knew he was right. Even as I sat in that bright, bustling police station, I felt it, watching, waiting, and I knew this was only the beginning. It started with a buzzing fluorescent light overhead, one of those that flicker in just the wrong rhythm to dig under your skin. I was midway through another night shift at the 24-hour gas station, just off Route 17. You know the kind, reeking of old coffee, shelves lined with stale chips, and the perpetual hum of the ice cream freezer. That night, a fog rolled in thicker than I'd ever seen, swallowing up the world outside. The highway was nothing but black asphalt disappearing into a wall of gray. I hated working these shifts alone, but we'd just lost our only other night clerk. Guess it was my turn to hold down the fort until corporate hired someone new. It wasn't long before the first weird thing happened. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard it. A faint tapping, like fingernails drumming against glass. It came from the front window. At first, I thought it was just some bug drawn to the neon open sign, but the sound was deliberate, methodical. Tap, tap, tap. I glanced up from the register, squinting through the fog-drenched pane. For a second, I thought I saw a shadow move. "Hello?" My voice cracked, embarrassing me even in my solitude. No answer. Steeling myself, I stepped out from behind the counter and moved closer to the glass. My breath fogged up the pane as I leaned in, searching for movement. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A hand. Pale, long fingers, almost skeletal, reached up and pressed against the outside of the glass. My heart leapt into my throat. I stumbled back, knocking over a rack of potato chips. The hand was gone. I fumbled for the phone, but of course, the damn landline had been out for days. Cell service out here? Forget it. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I convinced myself it was a prank. Some drunk weirdo messing around. But deep down, I knew better. I sat back behind the counter, trying to focus on restocking cigarettes and lottery tickets. For a while, it was quiet again, save for the buzz of that stupid light. Then the power flickered, plunging the store into a brief, suffocating darkness. When the light snapped back on, something wasn't right. One of the aisles, the one with the cheap candy, had been knocked over. Candy bars scattered across the floor. No way had that been like that before. I grabbed the flashlight we kept under the counter and stepped into the aisle. My palms were slick with sweat. "Is someone here?" I called out. My voice echoed against the empty shelves. No answer. Then, the freezer door slammed shut behind me. I whipped around, flashlight trembling in my hand. The freezer doors gleamed under the flickering light, their surfaces coated with condensation. Slowly, I moved toward them, each step feeling heavier than the last. The air seemed colder than it should have been, like the chill from the freezers had leaked into the entire store. My breath puffed out in short, nervous clouds. And then I saw it. One of the glass doors had fogged over, and written in the condensation, in long, jagged letters, were the words, "Look behind you." I froze. Every hair on my body stood on end. My throat felt tight, like something invisible was wrapping around it. I didn't want to turn. Every cell in my body screamed, "Don't turn around." But I did. The flashlight beam swept over the empty aisles, shaking as I scanned for anything out of place. There was nothing, just shelves of junk food and energy drinks. The fogged-up window near the entrance. The door I swore I had locked earlier, now standing slightly ajar. A tendril of fog, curling in like a lazy, creeping snake. And then, movement. At the edge of the beam, something darted between the shelves. Not walking, crawling. I backed up toward the counter, flashlight shaking. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. It appeared then, just for a second, peeking out from the corner of the pet food aisle. A face. But it wasn't a face. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin stretched unnaturally tight over bone. The thing leaned out farther, its head cocking to one side like it was studying me. Then it scuttled out of sight, faster than anything human should move. I didn't think, I just ran. I sprinted toward the front door, slamming into the glass, fumbling with the lock. My fingers felt clumsy, the cold making them numb. Behind me, I heard it again, the tapping. But this time, it was everywhere. From the freezer doors, the windows, even the ceiling. Tap, tap, tap. The door finally gave way, and I stumbled out into the fog. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop running. The gas pumps were barely visible through the haze, their lights dim and flickering. That's when I heard the voice. "Where are you going?" It came from all directions, deep and rasping, like someone trying to talk through a throat full of gravel. I turned, flashlight beam slicing through the fog, and saw them. Dozens of them. Figures, crawling on all fours, their faceless heads tilted unnaturally. Their pale bodies seemed to shimmer, half solid, like they were caught between this world and another. They were closing in, surrounding me. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran for my car. The keys were in my pocket, but my hands were shaking so badly, it felt like it took an eternity to pull them out. The flashlight slipped from my grip and rolled away, its beam casting eerie shadows as it spun. I finally got the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut. The fog pressed against the windows, thick and oppressive, and the creatures were there, circling the car. Their hands scraped against the glass, leaving smears of condensation behind. I turned the key in the ignition, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. The engine sputtered once, twice, before roaring to life. The creatures froze, their heads snapping toward me in unison. For a moment, everything was silent. Then they screamed. It was a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard, high-pitched, guttural, like 1,000 voices crying out in agony. They lunged at the car, their hands slamming against the windows, their bodies writhing and twisting in impossible ways. I floored it. The tires squealed as I shot forward, the creatures scattering in the headlights. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I drove through the fog, the empty highway stretching out before me like a lifeline. Eventually, the fog lifted. The gas station disappeared in my rearview mirror, swallowed by the darkness. I quit the next day. I still don't know what I saw that night. I don't want to know. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I hear it. The tapping. And I can't help but wonder if they ever really let me go. The diner where I worked night shifts wasn't anything special. Just a run-of-the-mill greasy spoon sitting off a desolate highway in the middle of nowhere. Most nights were uneventful, serving truckers, wiping counters, and flipping through an ancient magazine to pass the hours. But that night was different. It started when the clock on the wall chimed midnight, a ritual so mundane that I usually didn't notice it. This time, though, the sound stretched on longer than it should have, like the chime was being dragged, distorted, pulled apart. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed and flickered, sending the room into brief bursts of darkness. I glanced toward the door, half hoping to see a customer walk in and break the eerie silence. Instead, the night outside seemed thicker than usual, the parking lot lights barely piercing the foggy darkness. Then the bell above the door jingled. No one had walked in. That's when I noticed the booth at the far end of the diner. It was occupied. I hadn't heard anyone come in. The man sitting there had his back to me. He wore a black jacket, the kind with a hood, though it was down. His dark hair was greasy and matted, and he sat perfectly still, staring out the window into the nothingness beyond. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't turn around. Great. Another weirdo. I grabbed the coffee pot and walked over, the sound of my sneakers sticking to the linoleum, filling the oppressive silence. "Coffee?" He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of his face. His skin was pale, almost sickly, and his eyes were glassy, unblinking. "Do you ever wonder," he said, his voice low and gravelly, "what's watching when you're alone?" I froze, coffee pot trembling in my hand. What?" His lips curled into a grin, not a friendly one. Before I could respond, the lights in the diner flickered again. The man's grin widened, and when the lights steadied, the booth was empty. My stomach dropped. The coffee pot slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. And then, I heard it. A faint tapping, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from the kitchen. I stood frozen, staring at the shards of glass and the growing puddle of coffee at my feet. The tapping continued, echoing from the kitchen in the back. Each sound felt deliberate, as if whatever was making it wanted me to know it was there. My mind raced through rational explanations. Maybe it was a raccoon that got in through the back door. Maybe it was just the pipes. Maybe I was imagining things. But none of those thoughts made my legs stop trembling. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. No response. The diner was dead silent now, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and that god-awful tapping. I knew I had to check. As much as I wanted to grab my keys and bolt for my car, my feet betrayed me. I stepped cautiously toward the kitchen, every squeak of my sneakers against the linoleum, sounding like a gunshot in the stillness. The door to the kitchen was ajar, swinging slightly as if it had just been pushed open. The fluorescent light above it flickered erratically. "Anyone there?" I asked, louder this time. The tapping stopped. My breath hitched, and I clenched my fists to keep them from shaking. I stepped through the door and scanned the room. Everything was where it should be. The counters, the griddle, the industrial sink, nothing out of place. Until I saw the freezer door. It was cracked open. I knew I'd closed it. I was sure of it. The freezer was old, and it didn't stay cool unless it was properly latched. I edged closer, feeling the cold air snake out and brush against my skin. The tapping resumed, louder now, and it was definitely coming from inside the freezer. I reached out, my hand trembling as I grabbed the handle. Slowly, I pulled it open. The smell hit me first, metallic, rancid, and suffocating. Inside, the shelves were empty, save for a single object on the middle rack. It was a jar. The glass was smeared with something dark and viscous, and inside a mass of something pulsed faintly, as though alive. My stomach churned, but before I could back away, I heard a voice. "I told you," it whispered, low and guttural. I spun around, and there he was, the man from the booth, now standing in the doorway of the kitchen. His head tilted unnaturally to the side, and his grin was stretched wider than before, exposing teeth that were jagged and wrong. "You ever wonder what's watching?" he hissed, his voice distorted, like static on an old TV. I stumbled back, my foot slipping on the slick freezer floor. The jar fell from the shelf, shattering on the ground. The thing inside spilled out, a writhing, fleshy mass that began to grow. It unfurled long, spindly limbs that slapped against the walls, its surface glistening with a black, tar-like substance. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding, as the creature turned toward me, its eyeless face twisted and shifted, its mouth opening impossibly wide to reveal rows of jagged teeth. "Run," the man said, his voice almost gleeful. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted out of the kitchen, through the diner, and into the foggy night. My car was the only thing I could think of, my sanctuary from whatever nightmare was unfolding behind me. As I reached the parking lot, I glanced back at the diner. The windows were dark, but I could see movement inside, shadows slithering across the walls, something too large to fit in that tiny kitchen. I jumped into my car, fumbled with the keys, and finally got the engine roaring. Tires screeching, I tore out of the lot, leaving the diner and its horrors behind. But as I sped down the empty highway, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror. The man was standing in the middle of the road, his grin still stretched wide, his hand raised in a slow, mocking wave. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up, and even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I quit the diner the next day, but some nights, when the world is too quiet, I swear I can still hear the tapping. It started like any other night shift. The fluorescent lights in the back room of the gas station flickered with their usual irritating hum. I'd taken this job for the quiet. Somewhere I could collect my thoughts while dealing with the odd customer or two, mostly truckers and night owls. I'd been working there for 6 months without incident. That night, though, was different. It was the dead of winter, and a brutal windstorm had turned the streets into a graveyard of fallen branches and trash. I leaned against the counter, scrolling aimlessly on my phone, when the door chimed. A man walked in. His face was shrouded in the shadow of a hoodie, and he moved deliberately. too deliberate for someone who just wanted chips or smokes. Something about him immediately set my nerves on edge. He didn't look at me, didn't grab anything. He just wandered the aisles like he was searching for something. The cameras buzzed overhead. I glanced up at the monitors above the counter. I'd grown used to watching people on those screens. Most were harmless, predictable. But as I scanned the feeds, my stomach turned. There was a glitch in the camera. A second figure flickered into view behind the man. Tall, thin, its limbs too long for its body. Its head tilted unnaturally as it watched him. I blinked hard, thinking it was a software issue. But when I looked back up, the figure was gone. The man finally approached the counter, dropping a pack of gum and a small black notebook onto the surface. I rang him up, barely able to meet his eyes. "You working alone tonight?" he asked. It was a simple question, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. His voice was low, grating, like the sound of gravel under tires. "Yeah," I replied, regretting it instantly. He grinned, revealing teeth that were uneven and stained. He paid in cash, shoved the change into his pocket, and left without another word. But as the door swung shut, I noticed something he'd left behind. The notebook. It was small and weathered, its cover marked with a symbol I didn't recognize. My gut told me to leave it alone, but curiosity got the better of me. I flipped it open. The pages were filled with numbers, rows and rows of handwritten code that made no sense to me. Then at the bottom of one page, I saw something that made my breath hitch. "Do not stay until 3:17 a.m. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:48. For the next 29 minutes, I tried to shake it off as some kind of prank. But as the hour approached, strange things began to happen. The lights flickered, longer than usual. The cameras in the corner started to glitch again, showing static interspersed with brief, distorted images of the store. And then there were the noises, soft, guttural whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. At 3:16, the power went out completely. The store plunged into darkness, save for the faint blinking glow of the exit sign. And then the door chimed again. The chime echoed unnaturally in the silent store. My stomach knotted as the air around me turned cold, like I'd stepped into a meat locker. I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to scan the darkness. The aisles stretched out like corridors to nowhere, and the shadows seemed to writhe at the edges of the beam. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, trembling. No answer. The chime came again. The door hadn't opened. It was still shut, but the sound repeated over and over, like someone was walking in and out, or something was toying with me. Then a sound from the back room, a dragging noise, heavy and wet, like a sack of meat being pulled across the floor. My body froze, my breathing shallow. The noise stopped, replaced by a faint clicking sound, like fingernails tapping glass. I slowly aimed my flashlight toward the office door. It creaked open, just a crack, revealing only darkness within. "Who's there?" I whispered, barely audible even to myself. A voice answered, low and distorted. "You should have left." I nearly dropped my phone. The voice came from everywhere, above me, behind me, inside me. I took a step back, my heel catching the edge of the counter. That's when I saw it on the cameras. The monitors, somehow still active despite the power outage, showed the store from every angle, and in every feed, it was there. The thing I'd seen earlier, flickering like a broken signal. It stood impossibly tall, its head brushing the ceiling. Its body was grotesquely elongated, with limbs that bent in ways no humans should. Its face was nothing but a void, darker than the surrounding shadows. It moved slowly down the aisle, its steps silent but deliberate, coming straight toward me. I spun around, shining my light. Nothing was there. Yet on the cameras, it was only feet away. My fight or flight instincts kicked in, and I bolted for the back door. The dragging sound started again, louder now, as if it were right behind me. I reached the door and shoved it open, stumbling into the freezing night air. The parking lot was empty, the wind howling through the trees. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. Fumbling with the keys, I started the engine and peeled out of the lot. The rear-view mirror taunted me. I couldn't bring myself to look at it, terrified of what I might see. When I finally got home, I locked every door and window and sat in my living room, shaking. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from an unknown number. "You forgot the notebook." My blood ran cold. I didn't respond, didn't sleep, didn't even move for the rest of the night. When morning came, I called my manager and quit. I never went back to that gas station. Weeks later, I saw a news report. A night shift worker at the same gas station had gone missing. The police found the store in disarray, the back room smeared with streaks of something unidentifiable. They never found the worker, or any evidence of who or what had been there. I've kept the story to myself all these years, but every now and then, when I'm alone at night, I hear it again. That chime. And I know it hasn't forgotten me. The evening air was thick with the smell of wet hay and the faint metallic tang of old tools. The wind carried a strange, almost melodic whistling sound that seemed to rise and fall, as if it was alive and moving just beyond the edge of the cornfield. That's where I was, alone on my grandfather's farm for the weekend. He'd left a list of chores, but I was mostly there to keep an eye on the livestock. Easy enough. It started with the chickens. Around midnight, I heard them squawking, not their usual restless chatter, but a frenzied, chaotic scream that shot me bolt upright in bed. Grabbing the flashlight by the door, I shoved my feet into my boots and headed out. The barnyard was quiet, except for the frantic rustling inside the coop. When I opened the door, my stomach twisted. Something had ripped through the chicken wire, leaving a gaping hole. Feathers floated in the air like soft snow, and the floor was littered with streaks of blood. There were no tracks outside, just the hole and the silence. Too much silence. Even the frogs in the pond weren't croaking. I convinced myself it was a fox or maybe a coyote, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. By 2 a.m., the rain started, a steady, cold drizzle. I was lying in bed, staring at the wooden beams above me, when the faint sound of movement reached my ears. It wasn't coming from the house, but from somewhere outside. It was a low, dragging sound, punctuated by wet thuds, as if something heavy was being pulled through the mud. I hesitated for too long before grabbing the shotgun from the rack. As I stepped outside, the rain soaked me instantly, plastering my shirt to my skin. The sound was louder now. It was coming from the silo. The old wooden structure loomed ahead, its weathered planks dark against the stormy sky. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe the rain, knocking loose a tarp. But as I approached, the dragging sound stopped. I swung the flashlight beam towards the base of the silo. That's when I saw it. A figure was hunched over the pile of spilled corn, its arms long and bony, the skin stretched tight over sharp joints. Its back was to me, but its movements were jerky and wrong, like a puppet with tangled strings. I froze, the beam of light shaking as my hands trembled. Whatever it was, it turned its head slowly, unnaturally far, until its face was visible in profile. Its eyes were hollow, its mouth impossibly wide, filled with rows of teeth that looked more like shards of broken glass. It grinned, a thin, split-lipped smile, that made my knees buckle. And then it stood. It was tall. Too tall. It had to duck as it turned fully towards me. In its clawed hand, it held a chicken, what was left of one. It dropped the carcass, and the wet thud echoed in the silence. The thing started towards me, its movements fluid now, almost hypnotic. I ran. The mud sucked at my boots as I sprinted back to the house. I didn't dare look back, not even when I heard the wet slapping of its footsteps gaining on me. By the time I reached the door, I was screaming. I slammed it shut, bolting the lock and shoving the kitchen table against it for good measure. The footsteps stopped just outside. The porch creaked as it stepped up, and I could hear it sniffing, the sound wet and guttural. Then, nothing. I stayed up the rest of the night, the shotgun cradled in my arms, the flashlight trained on the door. It didn't return. Not that night. But the farm wasn't the same after that. Strange things kept happening. The cows refused to graze near the silo, and I found deep clawed marks gouged into the barn doors. And every night, without fail, that melodic whistling would drift through the air, growing louder as it approached the house. I left that farm the next morning, my chores undone. I never told my grandfather what happened. I didn't have to. When he called me weeks later, his voice was shaking. He said something was out there, something that didn't belong. He never saw it, but he heard the whistling. He sold the farm not long after that. Last I heard, the new owners abandoned it after their son disappeared. They said he was playing near the silo. I know better. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I left the farm and the horrors stayed there, tied to the land like a bad dream. But things like that don't let go so easily. They follow you. They linger. A few months after I left, I moved to the city, hoping the crowded streets and constant hum of life would drown out the memories. It worked for a while. I even started sleeping better, the image of that grinning, hollow-eyed thing fading with time. Then, one night, I heard it again. I was walking home late, my breath fogging in the chilly air. The streets were empty, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural in a city. I'd just turned a corner when I heard it. The whistling, that same melodic tune, the one I had convinced myself was just the wind back on the farm. I stopped dead in my tracks, my pulse hammering in my ears. It was faint, almost playful, coming from somewhere up ahead. Slowly, I turned my head. The streetlights flickered, casting long, jittery shadows. For a moment, I saw nothing, just empty sidewalks and parked cars. Then, it stepped into the light. It was the same as before, tall, gangly, its skin stretched taut over bones that seemed to shift and crack as it moved. Its eyes locked on mine, black and endless, and it smiled that impossible smile. But now, it was wearing something. A tattered flannel shirt and overalls, smeared with mud and blood, as if mocking the life I'd tried to leave behind. It tilted its head, studying me like a predator sizing up its prey. And then, it began to move. Not running, not lunging, but walking, slow and deliberate, each step a taunt. I did the only thing I could. I ran. The streets blurred as I sprinted, my lungs burning with each gasp of icy air. The whistling followed, growing louder, closer, no matter how fast I ran. I turned corner after corner, desperately searching for someone, anyone. But the city seemed empty, like the world had folded in on itself, leaving me alone with that thing. Finally, I spotted an old church, its heavy oak doors slightly ajar. I dove inside, slamming the door shut and sliding the iron bolt into place. The silence was deafening. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped. Then the whistling started again, just outside the door. It circled the building, the sound rising and falling as it moved, always just out of sight. I backed away, clutching a heavy candlestick I'd grabbed from the altar. My eyes darted to the stained glass windows, searching for any sign of movement. That's when I noticed the shadow. It stretched across the floor, long and spindly, growing larger as it moved closer to the window. Slowly, its face came into view, distorted by the colored glass, but unmistakable. It pressed a hand, if you could call it that, against the window, the claws clicking softly against the pane. And then, it smiled. I don't know what happened next. Maybe I screamed. Maybe I passed out. All I know is that when I woke up, the church was empty, the doors still bolted, and the whistling was gone. But it left something behind. On the floor, in the faint light filtering through the stained glass, was a single feather. Blood-stained and torn, just like the ones from the coop on the farm. I moved again after that, farther this time. Different city, different state. But no matter where I go, I hear it sometimes. Late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows grow long, that faint, mocking tune, carried on a wind that doesn't belong. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me, but I know this: it's still out there, somewhere, and it's still watching. So, if you're ever out in the countryside and you hear whistling, don't follow it. Don't look for the source. Just run and pray it isn't looking for you. It started with a bet. I was bored, drunk, and feeling invincible when I said I'd spend the night out at Widow's Creek Farm. For years, it had been the town's favorite spooky story, the abandoned farmhouse, where people swore they heard voices, saw shadows moving in the windows. Local legend said the owner, Mr. Eldridge, vanished one night, and no one had been able to buy or sell the property since. Something about the land made people uneasy, but I didn't believe in all that. Armed with a flashlight, a folding chair, and a thermos of coffee, I set out to prove everyone wrong. By the time I got to the farm, the moon was low and hazy, casting just enough light to turn the barn and house into black, jagged silhouettes against the night sky. I parked the truck at the edge of the property and made my way to the porch. The wood groaned beneath my weight, the sound echoing in the absolute stillness. Inside, the house smelled like wet rot. My flashlight beam swept over faded wallpaper and furniture covered in sheets. But what struck me was the silence. No crickets, no wind, just nothing. Easy, I muttered to myself, setting up my chair in the front room where I had a clear view of the kitchen and stairs. Just a night alone in an old house. The first few hours passed without incident. I tried to stream music, but the signal was dead. That's when I heard it, a faint thud upstairs. My flashlight shot toward the staircase, catching nothing but empty steps. It's just the house settling, I told myself, though my pulse was already quickening. And then, the lantern flickered to life. It was sitting on the kitchen table, a rusty oil lantern I hadn't noticed before. A weak yellow flame danced inside, casting moving shadows on the walls. I froze. There was no one here. No one could have lit it. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. The lantern flame sputtered as if in response, then settled into a steady glow. I stepped closer, my boots dragging against the warped floorboards. The lantern's glass was clean, the wick trimmed. Someone had been here recently. I turned in a circle, shining my light into every corner of the room, but saw nothing. Then I heard the footsteps. They were coming from above me, slow, deliberate steps crossing from one end of the house to the other. My flashlight darted to the ceiling as the sound moved toward the top of the staircase. "Hello?" My voice was barely above a whisper now. The footsteps stopped. The lantern, sitting on the table just a moment before, was suddenly at the foot of the stairs. Its flame flared brightly, and for a second, I thought I saw something behind it. A shadowy figure, long and thin, its head cocked to one side as if studying me. I ran. I bolted out the front door, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly in the dark. The truck was parked just a few hundred feet away, but as I ran, the air grew thick. My legs felt heavy, like wading through molasses. I glanced back over my shoulder and stopped dead. The farmhouse was ablaze with light, every window glowing fiercely. Figures stood in the glass, tall, thin shapes that didn't move, just watched as I struggled to breathe. And then the barn door slammed open. Something crawled out of the darkness. It was on all fours, moving unnaturally fast, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an impossible angle. I screamed and turned back toward the truck, pushing through whatever force was holding me back. I reached the door, fumbling for the handle, but the thing was right behind me now. I felt its breath, hot, wet, and rancid, on the back of my neck. Then the truck roared to life. I didn't start it. I wasn't even inside yet. The headlights blazed on, illuminating the creature as it lunged for me. It froze in the bright beams, its skin pale and stretched, its face a featureless mask. For a moment, neither of us moved, and then it shrieked, a sound so high and sharp, it felt like needles stabbing into my ears, and darted back toward the barn. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I threw myself into the truck, slammed the door, and peeled out of there, gravel spraying in my wake. In the rearview mirror, I saw the farmhouse lights flicker and die, one by one, until only the lantern remained, glowing faintly on the porch. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, back in the safety of town. I told my friends I'd lost the bet, made up some story about the place being too creepy to stay the whole night. I didn't mention the lantern, the footsteps, or the thing in the barn. I should have forgotten about it. Moved on. But last night, I woke up to find a faint yellow glow in my bedroom. The lantern was on my dresser. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The lantern sat on my dresser, its faint yellow flame steady and unmoving, the same lantern I left behind at Widow's Creek. I wanted to believe it was a nightmare, that I was still out there on the farm, and all of this was a fever dream, brought on by fear and exhaustion. But when dawn broke, the light of the flame didn't dim. It stayed just as bright, a constant reminder that whatever followed me home wasn't leaving. I couldn't stay in the house. I packed what I could and drove. No destination in mind, just miles of asphalt and endless trees. The morning air was crisp, but I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, expecting to see something there, the pale, stretched face of whatever came out of that barn. But I was alone, for now. I checked into a motel on the edge of a neighboring town, telling myself this was temporary, that I could figure out what to do next once I got some sleep. But when I opened the room door, my stomach dropped. The lantern was waiting for me on the bedside table. Its flame burned just as steady, casting that sickly yellow glow. I stepped back, leaving the door open, hoping some part of me was imagining it. But when I blinked, it was still there. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the lantern and hurled it across the room, expecting it to shatter, to douse that damn flame for good. But it didn't break. It landed on the carpet with a dull thud, the flame undisturbed. And then I heard it. The footsteps. They came from above me, faint and deliberate, just like they had in the farmhouse. My heart hammered as the sound moved across the ceiling, stopping directly above where I stood. A shadow fell over the bed. It stretched impossibly tall, the head cocked at that same unnatural angle. It wasn't cast by me. It was waiting. I fled the motel. There was no plan now, just an overwhelming need to keep moving. I drove for hours, the highway blurring into a gray monotony. The lantern didn't appear in the car, and for a fleeting moment, I thought maybe I'd left it behind. Maybe it was over. Then the radio crackled to life. At first it was static, but slowly I started to hear a voice, a low, garbled whisper, almost like it was trying to speak, but couldn't quite form words. I turned the radio off, but the whispering didn't stop. It was coming from the air vents now, from the faint hum of the engine. Widow? Waiting? My grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles white as bone. The voice was clearer now, repeating those same words over and over. Widow, waiting, widow, waiting. It was nearly sunset when the truck broke down. The engine sputtered and died, leaving me stranded on a stretch of empty road. I sat there for a long time, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. When I finally got out, the landscape around me was unfamiliar. Flat fields stretched out on either side of the road, broken only by the silhouette of a barn in the distance. My blood ran cold. It was Widow's Creek. The truck wouldn't start. My phone had no signal. I was trapped, and I knew I wasn't alone. The lantern was on the hood of the truck now, its light flickering weakly in the dusk. The footsteps started again. They were closer this time, moving with purpose, circling the truck. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. A presence, heavy and oppressive, like the air itself was pressing down on me. My flashlight barely cut through the growing darkness, but I swept it in frantic arcs, trying to find the source of the sound. That's when I saw them. Figures emerging from the fields, their movements slow and jerky. They were tall and thin, their bodies stretched unnaturally, their faces blank slates of pale skin. Dozens of them all converging on the truck. I grabbed the lantern off the hood without thinking, clutching it like it might somehow protect me. The figures stopped, their heads tilting in unison toward the light. The flame flared brighter, and for a moment, they hesitated. "Leave!" I screamed, holding the lantern high. The figures shrank back, their forms dissolving into the shadows. But the moment didn't last. The flame sputtered, growing dimmer, and they began to move again. Faster this time, closing the distance with unnatural speed. I don't remember how I made it back to the farmhouse, only that I did. The lantern led me, its glow flickering through the dark, guiding me past the barn and into the house. The door slammed shut behind me, and I locked it, though I knew it wouldn't keep them out. The figures were at the windows now, their faces pressed against the glass. The lantern sat on the table where I'd first found it, its flame burning weakly. And then it spoke. "Burn it," the voice whispered, faint and hollow. "End it." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the lantern and smashed it against the floor. The oil spilled out, catching fire immediately. The flames spread fast, consuming the room, the walls, everything. The figures at the windows screamed, their cries high and inhuman, and then they were gone. I ran. The farmhouse burned behind me, a towering inferno that lit up the night. By the time I reached the edge of the property, the house had collapsed in on itself, the flames dying down to embers. I don't know what I unleashed that night, or if I stopped it. The lantern was gone, but its light still haunts me. Sometimes when the nights are quiet and the air is still, I catch a faint yellow glow out of the corner of my eye, and I wonder if it's waiting for me to come back. The night started like any other, quiet, uneventful, with a slight chill in the air as the moon hung high over the sprawling farmland. I'd agreed to watch over my friend's farm while he and his wife took a rare weekend off. The place was massive, bordered by dense woods on one side and endless cornfields on the other. I was promised nothing more than a cozy guest room and some peace. Instead, I got something I'll never forget. By midnight, the house was silent. The livestock, a handful of cows and a stubborn old mule, were already settled in the barn. I'd finished my last round through the property, locked the doors, and double-checked the generator, since the area was notorious for power outages. All seemed fine. I was halfway into a second beer, flipping channels on an old TV in the living room, when I heard it. A sharp metallic asterisk, clank asterisk, like something striking the barn door. My first thought was, raccoons. They're bold out here. I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside. The yard stretched out into shadows, the barn standing 100 yards from the house, just beyond the motion-activated light's reach. As I stepped closer, the light snapped on. My stomach dropped. The barn door was wide open, swaying slightly in the breeze. Raccoons don't do that, I muttered to myself. The beam from my flashlight cut through the dark as I stepped inside. The barn smelled of hay and earth, familiar but strangely oppressive that night. The cows were agitated, shifting nervously in their pens, their eyes reflecting the light with unnatural brightness. The mule, usually indifferent to everything, let out a low, uneasy bray from the back corner. "Hello?" I called out, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I hoped whoever, or whatever, was there would just leave if they heard me. No response. Just the sound of animals shifting and the faint creak of the barn's wooden beams. Then I saw them. Footprints in the dirt floor. Bare, human-like prints. But they were wrong. The toes were too long, almost clawed, and the stride was unnatural, too far apart, like whoever made them was crawling or bounding rather than walking. I followed the tracks to the far corner of the barn, where the mule stood trembling, its ears pinned back. Beyond it was the old ladder that led up to the hayloft. The prints stopped there, but the mule's reaction told me whatever it was hadn't just disappeared. I didn't want to go up there. Every instinct screamed to leave, to lock the barn, and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I ignored it, whatever was lurking up there wouldn't stay contained. I climbed the ladder slowly, the wooden rungs creaking under my weight. My flashlight swept across the hayloft. It was empty at first glance, just piles of straw and old tools gathering dust. Then I noticed something odd. In the far corner, where the moonlight filtered through the slats, the hay was matted down, like something had been lying there, and next to it, scratch marks, long, deep grooves in the wood, as if made by claws. That's when I heard it, a faint clicking sound coming from above me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The barn had no second story, just the roof beams overhead. Slowly, I tilted the flashlight upward. Something was there, crouched among the beams, its pale limbs impossibly thin and long, its head cocked at an unnatural angle, as if studying me. Its eyes reflected the light like an animal's, but they were too big, too human. It moved suddenly, skittering along the beams like a spider, the clicking sound growing louder as its claws scraped against the wood. I don't remember climbing down. 1 second, I was staring at it, and the next, I was sprinting toward the house, my flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, my heart pounding so hard, it hurt. The house felt wrong now, like it wasn't safe anymore. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Not unusual for the area, but it felt deliberate. Then, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. I could hear it now. The faint asterisk, click, click, click asterisk of claws on the porch outside. It wasn't trying to hide anymore. It wanted me to know it was there. I moved as quietly as I could, grabbing the only weapon I could find, a rusty hatchet from the fireplace tools. The sound moved to the side of the house, then the back, as if it was circling, testing the walls. Then came the worst sound yet, the creak of a window sliding open upstairs. It was in the house. My mind raced. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide that it wouldn't find me. The only option was to face it. Hatchet in hand, I crept up the stairs, every step feeling like it could be my last. The hallway stretched out in front of me, the guest room door slightly ajar. The faint moonlight spilling in showed the curtains fluttering. The window was wide open. The clicking had stopped. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty, but the bedspread was disturbed. Claw marks raked across the headboard. My pulse was deafening in my ears as I backed out of the room. That's when I felt it. Hot breath against my neck. I spun around, swinging the hatchet wildly. It caught something, the blade sinking in with a wet asterisk thunk asterisk. A screech filled the air, high-pitched and inhuman. The creature recoiled, its long limbs thrashing as it tried to pull away. I saw it clearly for the first time, its skin pale and stretched taut over its bones, its face a grotesque mimicry of human features, twisted into something predatory. I didn't stop swinging until it stopped moving. When the sun rose, I buried what was left of it in the woods. I don't know what it was, and I don't want to know. My friend's farm looks peaceful in the daylight, but I'll never stay there again. Some things aren't meant to be explained, and some places aren't meant to be guarded alone. A week after that night, I got a call from my friend. He thanked me for watching the farm and casually asked if I noticed anything strange while I was there. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. How could I explain what happened without sounding insane? Instead of answering directly, I asked why he'd asked. His tone shifted, less casual, more guarded. Well, he began, we've been having issues for a while. Strange sounds in the barn, missing animals. Thought maybe it was coyotes or feral dogs, but the footprints we've found don't match anything we know. The neighbors have seen things near the woods. Things? I asked, my voice tight. Yeah, like figures. Too tall, too thin, running on all fours. One of the neighbors swears it looked right at him. They won't come near the property now. He laughed nervously. Honestly, I figured it was just their imagination until we started losing livestock. I gripped the phone tighter, my pulse quickening. Why didn't you tell me this before I stayed there? There was a long pause. I didn't want to scare you off. Besides, we figured it was just animals. Nothing that'd bother a person, you know? I didn't respond. My thoughts were spiraling back to that night, to the thing in the barn, its impossible limbs, the way it moved, how it felt too smart, too aware. Hey, he added, we're putting the place up for sale. The wife and I decided it's not worth the stress. Whoever buys it can deal with whatever's out there. That was the last time I heard from him. The farm sold within a month, and I heard the new owners moved in without issue. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. I tried to convince myself that whatever I'd faced that night was gone, that maybe I'd killed it. But deep down, I knew better. About 3 months later, I was back in the city, starting to feel normal again. Then one evening, as I was locking up my apartment for the night, I heard it. A faint asterisk, click, click, click asterisk, from somewhere in the hallway. My blood ran cold. I stood frozen, staring at the peephole in my door, expecting to see something staring back. But when I finally worked up the courage to look, the hallway was empty. The sound stopped. But now, every night when it's quiet, I listen for it. Sometimes I think I hear it, just at the edge of perception. A soft, rhythmic asterisk, click, click, click asterisk, like claws on wood, like it's waiting for me. And I know one thing for sure, whatever it is, it doesn't stay on the farm. You'd think that driving an 18-wheeler through endless highways at night would make you immune to fear. I mean, I've seen it all. Road rage, accidents, even a guy walking naked on Route 66 like he was auditioning for a horror flick. But what happened last month? That wasn't the usual trucker nightmare. That was something else. Something wrong. I'm hauling cargo across Nebraska, about 2 a.m. The road is a strip of black slicing through miles of flat nothingness. It's quiet except for the steady hum of the rig's engine, the kind of quiet that lets your thoughts wander to dark places. Then, my CB radio crackled to life. "Breaker 19, you out there?" The voice was low, shaky. I hesitated. Usually it's other truckers chatting about routes, weather, or just swapping jokes to kill the boredom. But something in his voice had me grabbing the mic. "Yeah, this is Long Haul. What's up?" Static hissed for a moment before his reply came through. I think I'm being followed." "Followed?" I asked, gripping the wheel tighter. My eyes scanned the rearview mirrors out of reflex, even though I knew the highway behind me was empty. "You sure about that? Ain't nobody out here but us." The radio crackled again, and his voice came through more frantic this time. "It's not a car. I don't know what it is. It's been tailing me since mile marker 240. Every time I look back, it's closer." "Closer? What are you seeing, man?" I asked, feeling a bead of sweat roll down my temple. Nebraska highways don't exactly have streetlights, and whatever he was dealing with was probably some stray animal or a trick of the dark. He didn't answer right away. Instead, there was a long pause, filled only with static, before he finally whispered, "Eyes." "Eyes?" I repeated, my stomach tightening. "Yeah," he said, his voice trembling. "Like headlights, but wrong. Too low to the ground, and they flicker, like they're blinking. I swear to God, man, it's watching me." I glanced at my GPS. Mile marker 240 was about 10 miles behind me. Whatever was happening to this guy, it wasn't far off. "All right, buddy, stay calm. Where are you now?" "Just past mile marker 250. It's still back there, but it's closer. I can feel it." His voice cracked, and for the first time, I heard real terror in his words. This wasn't just highway paranoia. He truly believed something was after him. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a rest stop at 255. Bright lights, other truckers. Head there, and I'll meet you." "No," he snapped, almost yelling. "It won't let me stop. Every time I slow down, it gets closer. I can hear it, like claws scraping the pavement." My blood ran cold. I turned on my high beams, as if that would somehow protect me. "What's your rig?" I asked. "I'll look for you on the road." "Freightliner Cascadia. White cab, red trailer," he muttered. "But I don't think you'll make it in time." Then the radio went dead. I grabbed the mic again. "Breaker 19, you there? Talk to me." Static hissed in response. My heart pounded as I pushed the accelerator, the engine growling as the truck surged forward. I was determined to catch up to him, or at least see what the hell was going on. At mile marker 252, I spotted him. A white Freightliner with a red trailer barreled down the highway ahead of me, swerving erratically. His brake lights flickered, as though he was trying to stop, but couldn't. Then I saw them. Eyes. two faint yellowish glows, low to the ground, darting in and out of the darkness behind his trailer. They weren't headlights. They were alive. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, my palms slick against the steering wheel. The glowing orbs moved like they were studying him, stalking him. Then, they shifted focus. To me. I felt my chest tighten as the eyes blinked, slowly, deliberately, and locked onto my truck. Suddenly, the Freightliner veered off the road, its horn blaring in a panicked howl. It disappeared into the cornfields, leaving me alone with whatever had been chasing it. The glowing eyes began to speed up, closing the distance between us. I floored it. My rig groaned under the strain, the speedometer climbing past limits I knew weren't safe for a truck this size. But the eyes kept up, growing brighter, hungrier. The road ahead blurred as adrenaline coursed through me. Then I heard it, a scraping like metal on asphalt. It wasn't coming from my rig. It was coming from underneath it. My radio came back to life with an ear-splitting burst of static. A voice came through, distorted and guttural, nothing like the man I'd been speaking to earlier. "You can't outrun it." The sound of claws raked across my trailer, and I felt the whole truck shudder. I gritted my teeth, swerving wildly to shake whatever was beneath me. The weight shifted, and I nearly lost control, the trailer fishtailing dangerously close to the edge of the road. Up ahead, the rest stop appeared like a beacon of hope, its floodlights cutting through the darkness. I didn't slow down. I couldn't. The eyes vanished just as I burst into the parking lot, skidding to a halt amid a few other rigs. My hands trembled as I killed the engine and jumped out of the cab. Nothing. No glowing eyes. No claws. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant chirp of crickets. Other truckers looked at me like I was crazy as I inspected the underside of my truck. Deep gouges ran along the metal, like something with claws had been clinging to it. My legs felt like jelly as I slumped against the side of the cab, breathing hard. "Hey, you all right?" one of the truckers asked, stepping closer. I opened my mouth to speak, but froze when I saw it. Out in the distance, just beyond the edge of the floodlights, two faint yellow eyes blinked. Then they disappeared into the darkness. I quit long hauls the next day. Let me tell you something. Long-haul trucking is not for the faint of heart, not just because of the endless miles or the isolation, but because of the things you see at night. I've been on the road for over 15 years, driving through every back road, highway, and nowhere town you can imagine. Nothing shakes me easily, but one night, one stretch of black asphalt made me question everything. It was a clear autumn night when I picked up a late delivery from a warehouse in Kentucky, heading west to Missouri. The load wasn't anything out of the ordinary, crates of furniture, some tools, but the route took me through a patch of the Appalachians that's more shadows than road after dark. Truckers call it the Devil's Backbone. Why? Because people and vehicles disappear there. But nobody ever really talks about it. We just drive. As I crossed into the mountains, the CB radio crackled. A gruff voice, another trucker said, "Breaker 19, anyone rolling through Backbone tonight, might want to steer clear." Silence. I should have turned around then, but I didn't. Superstitions, I muttered to myself. Besides, I had a deadline to meet. An hour later, the road narrowed. The moonlight barely penetrated the thick trees overhead. My headlights fought against the ink-like darkness. The forest leaned too close, like it was watching. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, a shape darted into the road. I slammed on the brakes, my trailer screeching and groaning behind me. The truck stopped inches from what looked like a deer? No, not a deer. It was too tall, too thin. The thing turned its head toward me, and I swear its face wasn't right. Black eyes, like a doll's eyes, and its mouth, jagged like it had too many teeth. It tilted its head almost curiously before lurching away into the woods. My hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. My instincts screamed to keep driving, but my engine stalled. That's when I saw the scratches. 3 deep parallel gashes raked across my hood. Fresh, the kind no animal leaves behind. The CB buzzed again, but it wasn't static this time. A low growl came through, like an animal, or a man imitating one. "Still rolling, driver?" A voice rasped, half laughing, half snarling. I was about to radio back, demand who it was, but the air in the cab grew cold. Breath fogged in front of me, though my heater was blasting full, and the forest, so loud with crickets and wind minutes before, had gone dead silent. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, slow, something big, something deliberate. I refused to look out the window, but in my mirror, I saw the outline of something. Something tall, too tall. It stood just beyond the reach of my brake lights, watching. A gut instinct I'd never felt before screamed at me to stay in the cab. The truck finally roared back to life. I floored it, the trailer swaying as I tore through the twists and turns. The further I got, the more the feeling of being hunted lessened. But it wasn't over. 30 miles later, I pulled into a rest stop, one of those desolate lots with a vending machine and a flickering light. Another rig was parked there, engine off, but no driver in sight. I stepped out, my boots crunching gravel, and checked my hood. Those gashes, they weren't just scratches anymore. They were smoking, smoldering like they'd been branded into the metal. And then, from the woods beside the lot, came a laugh. Not a man's laugh, not a child's laugh. It was distorted, like a tape player chewing on a bad recording. The hairs on my arms stood on end. "Driver," the same voice from the CB crooned, but this time it wasn't over the radio. It was in the air, behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. Just my truck, just the woods. But deep in those trees, I swear, I saw eyes. Not 2, dozens, blinking in unison. I didn't stay to find out what they belonged to. I climbed back into my rig, locked the doors, and drove until dawn. When I finally reached Missouri, the scratches on my hood were gone, replaced by pristine metal, like nothing had ever happened. But I know what I saw. And every time I pass through Appalachia, I see those same blinking eyes in my nightmares. If you're driving through the Devil's Backbone, keep your eyes forward, your windows shut, and don't stop for anything. A week passed, but the shadows of that night followed me. Truck stops felt quieter than usual, the roads darker, and the CB radio, even when silent, felt ominous. The scratches may have disappeared from my truck, but the memory of them burned in my mind. And then, the real nightmare began. My next haul was a routine trip, heading south toward Alabama, a midnight run. As always, I preferred driving at night. Less traffic, more peace. But peace was the last thing I found. It started with my GPS going haywire. One moment it showed a straight route. The next, my truck icon spun wildly, as if I'd veered off-road. I checked my map, recalibrated, and pushed on. That's when I noticed something. The mile markers weren't right. Each marker was different. One read 142, then the next said 666. I laughed it off, thinking I was seeing things. But the markers grew stranger. End, turn back, and one that simply read run. The rational part of me fought to dismiss it, a prank, bad lighting, or exhaustion. But deep down, I knew better. And then I saw the rig. It was pulled over on the shoulder, headlights blazing. The truck looked abandoned, door swinging gently in the breeze. I slowed, radioing out of habit. Breaker 19, you need a hand, driver? Static. The closer I got, the more I noticed something wasn't right. The rig's cab was empty, but the trailer doors hung open, swaying like something or someone had forced them apart. What stopped me cold was the graffiti scrawled across the trailer in thick black letters. Nothing leaves. I slammed the accelerator. My rig roared forward, the abandoned truck disappearing in my mirror. About 10 minutes later, my CB crackled. You left something behind, driver. A voice whispered, raspy and wet, like someone speaking underwater. Who is this? I snapped, my voice shaking. Silence. Then another sound, a scraping, like nails on metal. My stomach dropped as I realized it wasn't coming from the CB. It was coming from the trailer. Whatever it was, it had hitched a ride. My headlights caught a curve in the road ahead, forcing me to slow down. The scraping grew louder, more frantic, as if whatever was back there knew I was easing up. I gripped the wheel, heart pounding, until I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled over, leaving the engine running, and grabbed my flashlight. As I stepped out, the night wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy, too quiet. I circled to the rear of the trailer, every crunch of gravel under my boots echoing too loud. My flashlight beam trembled as I pointed it at the doors. Deep gouges raked across the metal, forming patterns. No, symbols. My hands were sweating, but I reached for the handle. The moment I unlatched it, the doors flew open, and someone lunged at me. I stumbled back, falling hard on the asphalt. It was a man, or what used to be one. His skin was gray and stretched taut, his eyes sunken, but blazing with a sickly yellow light. His mouth twisted into an inhuman grin as he crawled toward me on all fours, faster than any human should. I scrambled back, yelling, "Stay the hell away!" But he didn't stop. His movements were jerky, like a puppet on strings, and his grin widened impossibly as he reached out. That's when I heard it. The sound of tires screeching, a horn blaring, and then the crunch of impact. Another truck coming around the bend had plowed into the figure, throwing it into the ditch. I staggered to my feet, breathing hard, as the driver of the other rig jumped out. "You okay?" he asked, looking me over. I pointed to the ditch, but when we checked, the thing was gone. Only a smear of dark, oily blood remained. We didn't talk much after that. The other driver offered to follow me to the nearest truck stop, and I didn't argue. The rest of the drive was uneventful, but the entire time, I felt those eyes on me, watching, waiting. When I reached the stop, I parked, climbed into the sleeper, and locked every door. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness, that thing was still lurking. I never drove through the Devil's Backbone again, and I'll never forget the lesson I learned that night. Some roads aren't meant to be traveled. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 2:43 a.m. The highway was dead, a straight ribbon of asphalt vanishing into the darkness. My CB radio crackled faintly with static, the voices of distant truckers trading stories to stay awake. I adjusted my cap and yawned, the hum of my 18-wheeler lulling me into a dangerous sense of calm. Then, out of nowhere, a voice broke through the static. "Eastbound on I-70. Anyone else seeing this?" The voice was shaky, breathless, like someone who just ran a marathon. I grabbed the mic. "Eastbound here. What's going on?" Static swallowed his reply, but I heard enough to send chills down my spine. "Black semi. No lights. Coming up fast." I shifted in my seat, suddenly wide awake. My headlights illuminated nothing but the road ahead, bordered by skeletal trees and the occasional mile marker. I checked my rearview mirrors. Nothing but empty black. "Anyone else out there?" The voice called again, this time frantic. "Calm down," I said into the mic. "Where are you exactly?" I think mile marker 82. It's behind me." "Oh God, it's right on me." The transmission cut out with a burst of static. My heart thudded against my rib cage. Mile marker 82 was about 10 miles ahead. I pressed harder on the gas, my truck rumbling as it picked up speed. I don't know why I felt compelled to go faster. Curiosity? Duty? Or maybe some primal part of me was already screaming, "You should turn back." 10 minutes later, I reached marker 82. The asphalt gleamed under my headlights, but the road ahead was empty. I slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter. My CB buzzed again, but it was faint this time, almost garbled. "Don't stop." The message made my skin crawl. I rolled my window down slightly, letting in the cold